Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week I am going to be discussing Warhammer 40k editions 3, 5, and 6. I had set out 4th edition, so I really cannot comment on that edition. But these 3 editions I am talking about are really pretty much the same edition, just with really minor tweaks. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about the middle editions of Warhammer 40k. One of the first things one sees when one switches from 2nd to 3rd edition is a streamlining of the rules. This first comes into play with the elimination of the psychic phase entirely. In fact, the various psychic powers, while they are still parts of the armies, no longer even involved roles for the most part. They just happened, and you did them during the appropriate phase, and each psyker had one power. There was no choosing what they had. This was kind of disappointing, but that's how it was at the time. And it was a little bit better than 2nd edition, where you never knew what you were going to get. You were a Space Marine librarian, you had Smite. You didn't have to draw a card to find out what you got. But of course it did away with the multiple levels of psychers. So there was no level 2, level 3 psychers at that time. But another of the changes was just how things worked out. So it still had the same basic phases: move, shoot, assault. And yes, they changed it from hand-to-hand to assault. Movement, you moved 6 inches. Period. Everyone moved 6 inches. Let's see. Shooting phase, followed the standard. Except, the big change here from previous editions was, if even one model in a unit moved, the whole unit was considered as having moved. So this meant there was no more anchor heavy bolters or anchor heavy weapons in a Marine tactical squad, or anchor heavy weapons in an Imperial Guard squad, or anything like that. It was now one model moved, even to turn, and the whole unit was considered as having moved. Run was gone. It would come back in later editions, but run was gone in 3rd edition. And the assault phase worked different. Worked noticeably different, in fact. First, there was the fact that you could charge 6 inches. So that means you moved your 6 inches during the movement phase. If you were within 6 inches of another unit, another enemy unit, you could charge that unit. And this was the start of, you could wipe out a unit in close combat. Not in the actual close combat, but in the, if you broke an enemy unit, if you made it run, and it fell back into range and line of sight of another unit, that unit would be assumed to have opened fire on the fleeing unit and mowed it down. These were important tactics to use, especially for Marines, because Marines auto-succeeded their morale checks in close combat. But this was the big initial change. Different units had different little things that they could do, but that was really a sort of bonus depending on the faction. Like Eldar could, I believe it was, move again instead of shooting because they were a fast unit. But one other big thing was 3rd edition did something that has not been done since. Because 3rd edition invalidated all the old codexes, because it was such a significant change to the rules, they put all the army lists into the back of the main core rulebook. And that has not been done since. 8th edition, which did the same thing, actually released a series of index books. But we'll talk about that later. Now, shooting phase got some significant changes just based on how weapons worked. This was when they did away with those wonderful sustained fire dice. Now, weapons were classed as various type of weapons. What they said, the type of weapon told you what you could do with it, when you could fire it, how often, and how many shots you would get with it. And they changed another key detail. They changed armor penetration. See, armor penetration in 2nd was what you rolled to punch through tank armor. Armor penetration in 3rd and later editions was what armor no longer got a save. So, like, a bolt gun was an AP5. What that meant is Imperial Guard, who mostly had saves of 5 or 6, did not get saves. Scout Marines, things that got anything like a 4+ save, they still got their save. And the previous edition, it was a modifiers to the armor save. And the subtle change here is this made certain weapons Terminator killers. You see, in the previous edition, while most things got their saves on 1d6, Terminator armor and Orc Mega armors used 2d6 for their saves. And this meant they could take hits from things that most other units didn't even stand a chance against. Well, in this edition, starting in 3rd, and at the very beginning of 3rd, this was very much the case. A weapon with an AP of 2 killed Terminator armors. Now, shortly after the edition came out, there was a White Dwarf publication that fixed Terminator armors, sort of, and gave them a 5+ invulnerable save on top of the 2+ standard armor save. So they could at least have a 5-up chance when getting shot by one of the so-called Terminator killer weapons. But it was still a case of you had weapons that previously Terminators had a good chance of surviving. Terminators no longer having a chance, or having a very slim chance. But that was one of the main changes. Armor penetration became a big deal. Now, the other big deal was with the changes they did to vehicles. They slashed armor values. And it became when you were rolling to penetrate a tank's armor, you rolled the strength of the vehicle, strength of the weapon, plus 1d6. With some weapons adding a second d6 at certain ranges. Mostly metal weapons. And if you rolled exactly the tank's armor, that was a glancing hit, and that rolled on one table. If you rolled more than the tank's armor, that was a penetrating hit, and you rolled on another table. And penetrating hits were deadly. There was like a 50% chance of destroying or at least removing the tank from play on a penetrating hit. Which is why there were things that let you cause the opponent to re-roll a penetrating hit. Didn't always help you, but they were there. And these were the core bits of 3rd edition. And this is what the later series of editions were all based on. Now, they did do some subtle changes. 5th edition sort of added in psychic tests, but it still kept all the powers in the same sort of, here's the power in this phase, here's the power in this phase, here's the power in this phase. And you got to pick from a list of powers. And then, charging was still a 6-inch charge. And it added a few other little details throughout it. One of these little tweaks was there were actually disallowed units in the assault phase. Now, of course, if a unit was already locked in close combat, it couldn't assault. And 5th edition was where running was introduced. It also had a thing called Gone to Ground, which was basically a unit that was out in the open, throws itself on the ground to give itself a cover save. Or if it was in cover, to improve that cover save. But The other reason why a unit couldn't assault would be because they fired rapid fire or heavy weapons during the assault phase. Now, this one got quickly changed in the next edition. These were all still the case, except if you fired weapons in the assault phase in 6th edition, you could still assault. But you could only assault the unit you fired upon. Of course, 6th edition also changed the assault phase by making it rolling 2 dice 6 to determine your charge distance. And of course, if you'd run during the shooting phase, you could not assault. Though there were units that had that option due to special unit abilities. But these are the basic core of the series of editions. They didn't really change much between them. There was a constant tweaking of vehicles, changes to the glancing and penetrating hits charts, and changes on how many weapons a vehicle could fire, how far it could move before firing certain weapons. Those are little subtle things. And those were basically the main changes between editions. And slight tweaks to the psychic powers. But with that, I've gone over the cores of what I call the middle editions of 40k. Next week, I will be talking about 7th edition, which kind of did some really significant changes overall without doing anything so drastic as 3rd and 8th edition did. So, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe down below. The little bell icon will get you notified on if there's any notifications from me when I update a new video. Until then, I would like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.